Hey guys, Isa with Journey to Programming. In our last video, which if you haven't checked it out, I'll put it somewhere around here. Here. That was awkward. All right. Anyways, what I talked about is why you keep failing the technical interviews for programming jobs or software engineering jobs. And what I want to go over today is practicing your coding. All right. One of the key points or the critical aspects to preparing for your coding interviews that I mentioned in that video was to practice coding like you're going to be doing a coding interview. And one of the primary websites people use for that is Leetcode. There's HackerRank, Leetcode, Project Euler, and a few other coding websites like that. I think Top Coder's one as well. And they all kind of emphasize the same thing. They're all interview question type websites where they have like a little in-browser IDE and they give you a problem statement and then you have a few options of languages that you could choose from, whatever you're comfortable with, and then you try to solve the problem in their IDE or their browser IDE. You could go ahead and use a test cases button, which allows you to run your code against the test cases for that question. And then you also have the ability to submit it against a large set of test entries or unit tests to see if your code actually fits and will solve the problem with the consideration of like edge cases and stuff like that, okay? Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in here. I am 100% going to try showing you guys the platform and then try to give you guys an example of how to break down these problems. I've already picked a few out, which I've done before, that are easy and simple, and I just want to talk about them with you guys. So let's jump right in. I've gone ahead and minimized me so that I can show you guys Leetcode. And Leetcode is a very, very common website to use. I've gone ahead and demonstrated it here. This is going to be the front page you hit when you log into Leetcode. And they've already got a whole bunch of third-party logins already integrated here. So it's really easy to set up an account. Just go to sign in. And if you don't want to use one of your third-party accounts, like your LinkedIn, Google, GitHub, or Facebook, then go ahead and just make one with a burner email or something like that, okay? But get started on this. Don't be afraid to begin practicing early and often, okay? It is necessary, again. So let's go ahead and show you guys a little bit more. Like I said, I want to show you guys a few sample problems. So I've gone ahead and closed out that login page, which I had in incognito because I didn't really want to show you guys my direct info right there. And I'm already logged into this account, and these are two of the easiest problems. So the screen I just closed was like the home page you get when you first log in. After you log in, it's like a feed of forums and posts, etc., stuff that we're used to getting. But I've already picked out a couple of problems which are really supposed to be easy and simple for people to break down and understand and then also solve. And most of you guys can probably solve these without my help here. But solving it in a platform like this is very different than breaking it down and solving it in an IDE that we're used to. If you're used to working in Visual Studio or VS Code or Eclipse or something like that, then that's where you feel like you're at home. But when you whiteboard test, you're generally not going to have that comfortability. You're either going to be writing on a board, or although it's called whiteboarding or programming tests on a whiteboard, sometimes companies will provide you with a laptop and just a plain old text editor to write your code and to talk through your solutions. Okay, but using this platform gives you a bit more of an example like that, all right? So looking at the platform, what you have is a problem statement and a few examples, and then a whole bunch of other little hints and stuff like that. If you pay for their premium subscription, a lot of the platforms do this, and they show you a little more info, maybe the type of companies that use this question in their interviewing process. I've never used that, and I don't know. I don't think it's worth it. I think just practice, get better, learn how to break down problems like this, and you'll do fine. But let's go ahead and talk about this problem. I'm not going to write any of the code for you because I think you guys can do this problem without my help. is just understanding how to break it down that I want to talk about. So this title is two-sum for this problem. It's an easy one, and I think a majority of people solve this problem. I think the percentage of people that have answered, oh, let's see, accepted versus submissions. It looks like it's almost 50% of people have successfully submit this answer. So in my case, let's just go through the platform really quickly. So you jump on the problem, you get the description, title, etc. There's a solution tab where it shows like a forum of all solutions that people have shared. These are your submissions. If you click on this tab, here's the discussion forum for how to solve this and maybe improve upon it, how to maybe find an optimal solution with the best time complexity. And then here is that drop down or the options for languages that I was talking about. If you're a web person, JavaScript may be what you go to, or Python. I'm used to C# was the language I used last, a lot prior to my current role and job. So nowadays I'd probably be either PHP or JavaScript. Nevertheless, C# is simple. I kind of remember the syntax for the most part. So I usually go with that. I know most of the library calls without having to look up too much reference and see what the hell I need to change syntactically to make it work. I can usually just compile, shows me an error. Okay, I know what to adjust. Anyway, so let's get back to the problem statement. All right, so given an array of integers, return indices of the two numbers such that they add up to a specific target. All right, so take a second and read that. And then let's read the next thing. So one tip here, always read the description multiple times and make sure you understand it. When you get a problem in person, or if you're on a call with somebody, an interviewer, and you're doing this on a shared text editor or in a Google Doc, make sure you ask questions. Make sure you ask for clarifications if you don't get it. All right, next, this is a critical piece of information here. You may assume that each input would have exactly one solution, and you cannot use the same element twice. All right. Looking at the example is going to shed light onto what they're talking about. We have an array of integers, okay? So they're giving us this array here. This array has been assigned to a variable named nums or an array named nums. The target, so two of these numbers in this array add up to our target value here, okay? So we understand that we should be able to find exactly two numbers that add up to our target. In this case, we can just see really quickly 2 and 7 will definitely add up to 9. All right, perfect. What do they want from us? They want us to return the indices of these two numbers. Great. Most of us understand how arrays are indexed. Most of us use languages almost always that index arrays starting at 0. So just looking at this, we could see, okay, this array has 4 elements in it. They're 4 integers because they state that these are integers. And we know that if we want these indexes, we can assume that the first one is 0, 1, 2, and 3. Our solution in this case is going to need index 0 and index 1, and that is what we need to return. So we're going to return those as a pair or as an array of just 2 indices in general. How do we know how we need to return that? The easiest way to know that is to now look at the actual method signature or function signature here on the right-hand side of our screen, okay? So you could see this was given to us. This is the function they want us to write, okay? This is going to return an integer array. So they want us to return our indices in an array. All right, so we know that now. You can go ahead and just create an array of 2 elements and use that as your output. All right, because every time it's going to want that. So let's look at this a little bit more. Given an array of integers, return the indices. We understand the problem statement. What other rules do we have? So we can assume each input will have exactly one solution. And we cannot use the same element twice. Okay, so a good example of that would be, let's say instead of 2, 7, 11, and 15, let's say that they give us a different input, right? So our input's actually 5, I'll go ahead and give it some brackets here, 5, 5, 7, or 8, 11, and 15. And our target is equal to 10. Okay. In this case, we cannot use the same element twice, which is 5. We can't come back to this first 5 and use it twice. But we could use these two separate elements, although they're the same number. All right, but then another case would be, for example, if it's the same question, but we only have one 5 available to us. We cannot go ahead and use 0 index or 5 as both our indexes. So that's basically what they're saying there. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but it's good to clarify that. So before you guys write anything, how would we generally solve this without even writing a little bit of code? Well, the simplest way I do it is I go through this array here after knowing the target, and I basically say, okay, this is my first number. If I find the difference between my target and this first element, it's going to tell me what number I need. And then I can just scan the rest of my array and see if that number exists within it. All right, so if we do 9 minus 2, then the difference is going to be 7, right? So then I scan the rest of my array, and by chance, in this one, 7 is my next number. That's great. It's equal to it. So now I know I have my two indexes, and I can go ahead and return that. I don't need to search anything else in the array. I'm happy. Great. Now, let's go ahead and give you guys an example of the same array over here, but let's move the numbers around. All right, so let's go ahead and put an 11 in the front, and maybe let's move the 7 to the end. Perfect. So we're looking for the same target. It's the same array number, or it's the same numbers within the array, but they've been scrambled about, right? So this time, the way my brain thinks about it is, all right, if the first index we get, if the number, or if any index we get, the number is greater than the target, we know that two numbers will not add up to it, all right? Unless there's negative digits. I guess they do not mention that in here, so that's good to know. That's a good question to ask. If you are answering this problem in an interview, you need to know whether or not you can expect there to be negative integers within your array. If you know that, you can account for it. But in this case, I'm going to assume for now that there always can be positive integers, all right? So 11 is greater than 9. We know that nothing can add into it if it's only positive integers. That will make it 9. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue or skip to the next index. Now we have 2. So 9 minus 2 is 7, like I mentioned on the last one. Now, from this point forward, I'm going to search to see if anything else is equal to that difference that I have, 7. I go to 15. That is not equal to 7, and it's greater than my target. So in both cases, it fails. So I'm going into the next index. This time I have 7. It's equal to the difference that I already have. So I know that this index and this index, so index 1 and index 3, are the correct indexes that I want to output. All right. So those are just two quick kind of ways that I would go about this. So what I'm trying to show you guys is we've read the problem statement. We understand exactly what they're asking. Now I want you guys to break it down into little steps before you write any code. All right, now thinking about what I just mentioned and how I would go about this, at this point, start thinking about how you could turn that general logic that's in your head. You know it, all right? Start thinking about how you can take that logic and convert it into code, all right? So I've gone ahead and taken away the Leetcode page because now it's just a talk about thinking. So we've been talking about the two-sum problem statement, all right? And what we know is that we need to be able to convert this logic into code. This is the hardest part for most people. So going back to our actual code here, we know, for one, that we need to be able to go through our array. All right? So ideally, most of you guys know how to traverse an array, how to loop through it, and all the languages give you the capability to do it. So maybe the first step is think, okay, how do I write the code so that I can loop through my array and perform the logic to check if my target can work with this array that we're given, right? So one way to do that is if you're used to using for loops, you could do a for loop for it. So you could do, for example, maybe for I int I equals 0 while I is less than the nums.length, nums being the array name, and then lastly I++ so that we increment our index every iteration of the loop, right? And then within that, I could do a bit of logic to check to see if those values are the two indexes that we need, right? So that logic being, okay, my nums at index, or I, maybe use the target minus my nums at I to figure out that difference we currently want, and then keep traversing the array to see if we found another number to kind of fit or equal that, right? Now, a few suggestions here. You're probably going to need to store your indexes in something. So you can either use that output int array, which only has 2 elements to do it, or you can create some temporary int variables, which can either hold indexes or values. I recommend store the index. It's a lot easier. You don't have to store an extra value or do an extra lookup to figure out which index that value is at, especially if there's duplicate indexes in the array. And then one other thing is, do you need to have 2 for loops to solve this problem? Can you do it with 1? Those are questions that you should ask and think about prior to writing the code. Think about how you do it by hand. If you went through this and you started at 11 and you said, okay, 9 minus 11, nope, 11 is greater, let's skip it, and we go to 2. All right, 2, 9 minus 2 is equal to 7, great. So we know that 2 is a potential index that can work for our solution. So now we keep searching from 2 to 9 minus 2 is equal to 7. Our next value, even if it's 5, so we don't go over, we'd say, is 5 equal to 7? No. We can progress forward. Is 7 equal to 7? Great. Okay, so that could still work with our first loop. But now you'd have to set some logic in there to allow you to continue iterating without running the difference every time. Does that mean you need a sub for loop or not? I'm not going to answer that. So again, that basically sums up what I wanted to show you guys today. If you have any questions, feel free to post them down below. If you made it this far, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you have not spent the time to write this on paper and try to solve it on your own, then I highly suggest or strongly suggest that you practice the next problem or this one on paper so that you understand the logic to solving it. This example has been pretty simple because I only used arrays with 4 or 5 digits. But what if you have an array with 1,000 digits, 1,000 elements in it, or 10,000 elements in it, and it takes you the entire array worth of iteration to figure out the 2 indexes that add up to your value? If that's the case, it's going to be a bit more complicated. So having a sound bit of logic on paper will help you guys understand the actual algorithm or solution you're going to write before you write it, so that when you get to those higher level or more complex inputs, it will work, okay? Now the next thing I'm going to suggest for you guys is make sure you use that run code button on the bottom right of Leetcode on their platform more often. Actually, here you go, I'll show it to you. So underneath my face here, one second, I'll move it. Underneath my face, you'll see there is a run code button. Make sure you use that to check your code frequently. All right, so let's show you what happens if I do that really quickly. It's going to judge, and there's going to be an error. What do you know? Not all code paths return a value. That's because it wants an int array to be returned, and I'm not returning anything. Great, so it's just going to run a quick compiling, and then it'll run your code against the test case that they've given you here. All right, and you can add your own test cases. So for example, if we wanted to test case this as another array and our target remains as 9, then you could do something like that. All right, so this is 2 test cases that it's going to run your run code against. This is the first one where this is our array, this is our target, and this is our second test case. And you could do this all the way down. Okay, you can add like 10 test cases, 15. If you want to add an array with like 100 random numbers, you can do that in here too. All right, I'm going to end it there. I went a little longer than expected. If you guys have any questions, again, post them in the comments below. I hope you guys have a good one and you guys continue practicing.